Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. You're watching TechStrong TV for today, Thursday, April 30th. Thanks and welcome. This is the 24th episode of TechStrong TV. It's hard to believe, but it's just rapidly going by. We're closing out, coming on the end of our fifth week now of this, and pretty amazing. In any event, though, we're glad you're joining us. And, most screens, either at techstrong.tv or digitalanarchist.com or perhaps devops.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal. Maybe it's on our DevOps TV YouTube channel or LinkedIn Live, Facebook Live, somewhere on your computer. But just a reminder, you can watch this on your mobile phone for both Android and iOS with the devops.com app. And the way I like to watch it is on my TV, on either Apple TV, Roku, or Amazon Fire, again with the devops.com app. And it's available on demand there, so you can watch it anytime you want. And there's a bunch of other videos on demand, including Jeremy Jones' Work From Home Fitness, if you're looking for a quick workout, as well as a bunch of other great content. So, also I will tell you, looking at the stats, more and more people are watching it on TV now, though, as I said, overwhelmingly, most people are still watching it on their computer. Anyway, also, we've built live chat in to TechStrong.tv. So if you're watching it on there, you want to ask a question, comment, whatever, you can chat on there, and we have it monitored by our team. So you can do that. You can also, there is a companion Slack channel at techstrongtv.slack.com, and you can get an invite for that off at the techstrong.tv website as well. Talk about finishing out our fifth week. We really kind of settled into a bit of a pattern. Every Tuesday we feature a couple of things, or at least one interview or session with our friend John Willis. Wednesday is Jane Grohl. I mentioned Working From Home Fitness with Jeremy Jones are usually 2 to 3 days a week. And of course, every day we have the Analyst Corner with Mitchell Ashley from Accelerated Strategies, and an interview or two with our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon. But we want more. If you'd like to be interviewed or you want to interview or do something with TechStrong TV, write me at editor@devops.com, and we can talk about it. Anyway, let me tell you what we have in store for today. It's a good show this Thursday. Our first interview is with Rachel Opsler, I've been told, by our off-camera here. Rachel's VP product over at PagerDuty. And, besides PagerDuty going through their own remote thing with all of this, they're really one of the companies that are empowering remote IT teams to keep the wheels turning and the lights on our networks and everything. And she's going to tell us a little bit about what they're seeing, what they've been doing, and where they think this is heading. After Rachel, I'm happy to do an interview I did with a new company just coming out of stealth, and that is Accurus, and we're meeting with their CEO and co-founder, Sachin Agarwal. And the thing with Accurus is immutable security for immutable infrastructure. Sounds pretty good. But Sachin will tell you more. The whole founding team there is a pretty savvy DevSecOps team, and I just certain companies you think are going to do well. This has the feeling of one. So I highly recommend that to you. And then from our archives, I'm going back to 2018 to an IBM Think conference interview I did with Ralph Van Beek from Robobank. Robobank and Ralph and his team there were doing groundbreaking work on DevOps and mainframes back in 2018. They still are. But I think this video, though it is from 2018, is still relevant and with some really good lessons in there. So we're going to show you that. Then I'll be back for the news. And then over to Charlene. Charlene has Robert Bean, CEO of Start Page Up, and then Mike Hamilton, former CISO of CI Security, co-founder of CI Security. And then Mitchell has some good stuff today. He has an interview with Elise Carmichael from Functionize, excuse me. And I think you'll find that interesting as well. And then I think Mitchell might have another segment after that. You'll see it. And then I'll be back to wrap things up. So, a lot in store today. Let's sit back and see what TechStrong TV has. We're going to break for a quick commercial. We'll be right back.
Tech is strong. We may be working from home, but tech goes on. Tech will continue to collaborate. Tech will continue to communicate. Tech is strong. Join us for TechStrong Con, June 4th, 12 hours strong, TechStrong. Featuring John Bacha-Galupe Willis, Shannon Leitz, William Hurley, Jasmine James, Kat Swatell, Cornelia Davis, James Wickett, Courtney Kistler, Damon Edwards. Live Q&A with speakers, exhibit halls, and more. Free, but register before spots fill at techstrongcon.com.
Okay, back here in the studio. As I mentioned, our first segment today is with Rachel Opsler. Rachel's VP Product at PagerDuty. And as I said, through this whole COVID thing, the internet has behaved remarkably well, given everything. And part of the reason for that is a lot of the programs like PagerDuty, incident response, and so forth, have allowed our IT teams who are working remote to stay on top of any incidents or problems that pop up, to work on it as a team, whether they're remote or not. And it's at times like this that you see the real value of a tool like PagerDuty. Rachel's going to talk about what they're seeing, what they're hearing from their customers, as well as what they're going through themselves, as they transition to a remote workforce here. So let's go over now with Rachel Opsler from PagerDuty.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone. Okay, I'm happy to be joined in this segment for TechStrong TV with Rachel Opsler. Rachel is with PagerDuty, product management. Rachel, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
It's nice to actually have you here. It looks like you are certainly working from home, like everyone else is. How's that working out for you?
It's working pretty well. I will say I did a renovation. I think I finished it about a year ago, and every day I am just very thankful that I'm not in the middle of that.
You're not kidding. We live in, and I mentioned to my wife, hurricane season's coming. We were talking about getting these hurricane-resistant windows so you don't have to do shutters. And she's like, "You're going to start doing all of that in the middle of this? Are you out of your mind? You're going to?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess we're not." Okay, but so be it. So Rachel, you're with PagerDuty, and certainly to our audience, PagerDuty is not an unknown quantity. Many in our audience are customers, and know of PagerDuty. Certainly, you've kind of defined the incident response market, as it applies to DevOps and everything, for as long as we're doing DevOps.com, which is six years now, more. But for those who may not be familiar, why don't you give us a little background?
Sure. So PagerDuty has been around a little over 10 years. And we originally were formed to, as you said, kind of resolve this big issue that happened when DevOps started, which is that there used to be tons of people that would stare at computer screens, waiting to see when a problem showed up on a screen and then go do something about it. Well, when you have engineering teams that are running and operating the code, they're not 24/7 staring at a computer screen. They do their work during the day, they go home at night. And if you do want someone to address an urgent issue or something that comes up, you need to proactively tell them about that issue. And so since then, we've added a lot of capabilities to the product beyond that initial piece. One was making sure that we can aggregate more and more signals, that we can orchestrate not just one person, but many people, make sure we get you into a bridge, that you're on your Slack channel, whatever communication tools that you're using, make sure that we orchestrate across the business. So if a business owner needs to know there's a problem, that we notify them as well. Maybe they don't need to work on fixing it, but they need to be kept informed. Context as possible to the person who is being interrupted with this issue, so they know, what to do to fix it.
Makes perfect sense. Rachel, I got to imagine though, in that a lot of your corner case kind of coverage areas, did you did you plan for a worldwide pandemic where everyone's going to have to work from home and still keep the wheels moving on the train here? And if so, how are you guys doing that?
Yeah. Yes and no. So we didn't precisely plan for a worldwide pandemic. However, we made a decision early on in the company that we were not as abrupt as it could have been. And the other thing is we really started out being born in the cloud. Our whole platform is in the cloud, number one. And then number two, our teams are really used to being multi-local. So we have offices in San Francisco and Toronto and Atlanta. We also have about 20% of our workforce is remote. And so if you have any given, traditional two pizza team or feature team, I don't think there's a single team we have that it doesn't have people in at least two locations, if not more than that. It's bad for us to go to full remote. Still a little different, but it's something that wasn't the biggest transition.
We're hearing a lot of companies, especially companies that were sort of cloud native and adopt cloud technologies and DevOps and Agile and these kinds of things. They are having an easier transition or an easier time of dealing with this than companies that are saying, oh my God, do my people have a device at their house that they can log into to do their work? And that's obviously a thing. But at the same time, when you look at the business of PagerDuty, right, part of your business is to empower your customers to be able to, monitor, get alerts, and deal with things. And so, as a product point of view, how is this work? How is this whole situation playing out for you?
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of interesting use cases, generically in our system that maybe we had not seen before. So one example is we see customers spinning up what we've been calling crisis management teams, and we ourselves have spun up one as a company. And so this is just a team of people who are responsible for acting quickly on something that is COVID-19 related, and it could be someone on the and staff has suspected symptoms. This is when we were still at work, of course.
Right.
And making sure that they were following the right procedures or doing what they needed to do. So that was one. We saw some interesting use cases around store closures. So let's imagine that suddenly you are a store manager and you know that your store needs to shut down. What if there were people who were scheduled to come in for a pickup of something the next day? How do you get in touch with them? How do you, so there are all these interesting requests to central IT to get information to help people figure out what is the right procedure to actually shutting something down. I mean, no one's ever done that before, right?
Yep.
Most people. And then, to your point, a lot of our customers are used to operating from wherever they are, and that is the way from home. Like a lot of our customers are set up that way, but there are some, if you think about that more traditional network operations center, they may not be set up to operate that way. They go in, they're on site for a shift, and then they leave. And so suddenly they're having to do this all from home. And so one of the things that we launched is best practices around virtual NOCs. So someone who is now virtual, what do you do? How do you make sure you get access to all the data you need and be able to coordinate your team?
Absolutely. Rachel, it would seem to me though, and I'm sure this is probably what you guys are saying, or maybe not, PagerDuty would be right in the mix at the heart of things. As you know, all these teams are remote, but yet they still have to manage infrastructure. Whether that infrastructure is in the cloud, on-prem, hybrid, whatever, you know, it would seem like PagerDuty is got to be a linchpin of making sure that, you know, things are operating, right? That nothing pops up.
Yeah, I mean, companies like Zoom and Slack are our customers. And so one thing that we saw pretty early on is number one, we had to make sure that we could meet the demand because there's increased traffic in our system.
Sure.
And the reason for that is because there's, of course, increased traffic in their systems. And they're also seeing, because of that increased traffic, a greater an increase of incidents. And so, you know, we observed in our platform, we looked a couple weeks out after, you know, most of the stay at home or shelter in place orders came out. And we saw a pretty significant increase in the amount of incidents that some of these companies were seeing. So we looked at online learning, and I'll just read some data, but online learning, we saw 11 times the number of incidents after versus before COVID happened. For collaboration tools, we saw 8.5 times the number of incidents before, you know, versus before. And for travel, this one was interesting. We saw 5 times the number, and I think, you know, since then that may have quieted down, but in the couple of weeks after it happened, suddenly everyone's having to cancel or change their travel plans. And so, you know, it puts a lot of strain on these systems to suddenly get this additional traffic.
Yeah, it does. It certainly does. Um, so I'm an optimist, right? I really feel like, hey, we've done a lot of what we can do to flatten the curve here. Let's hope we keep doing it. We don't come back too soon and make it worse. But at some point, whatever the new normal is will be the new normal, right? We get on with things. What do you think the lasting lessons are that PagerDuty has learned here, and how will that kind of manifest itself in what you guys are doing going forward, what you're offering going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of them is around communication. I mentioned earlier that, you know, not only do we help teams respond to incidents and fix them, but we also help them communicate to the broader organization what is going on, especially if there's anything that's customer impacting. And so that's something that we've really seen a lot, and seeing these interesting use cases of people using PagerDuty is that you know, when you have to communicate to a broad set of people about a specific issue and also get people to work on that issue, it's really important to be able to do that in real time with the right context and get people to work together. And so that's a place where we're thinking about our product roadmap and making a bigger investment is around that broad communication across the organization. Another piece of this, of course, is that, you know, I heard a funny story about, you know, people trying to get their parents to finally like order food online or be able to do certain things online. And I think the last holdouts of people who have not transitioned to doing things online, I mean, we just forced the curve, right? Everyone talks about digital transformation, but we just forced the curve, and now, you know, almost everyone, I would imagine, is capable and learn, you know, and doing things online. And so I don't think we're going to go back from that, right? I think we're going to.
I can't imagine how, yeah. I mean, so like, you know, we were talking about companies that weren't ready for this. So companies that infrastructure is basically based upon you VPNing back into their mothership, into their home office, whatever, and then going from there first out to the cloud for a SaaS-based app. I mean, in the middle of this whole thing, you can't change it. You're kind of stuck with it. But I can't imagine companies still doing that after this.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And that was another forcing function, right? The same way everyone's forced to do things online, all these companies are now forced to make sure their employees can work remotely very
Mhm.
effectively. And so there's also no going back from that. I mean, we've talked about a lot at PagerDuty, and I imagine that we will have more people that are working from home more often.
Oh, no doubt. Everyone we speak to says, you know what? What's the sense? I mean, there's really no reason why everyone needs to come in the office every day. Here's an interesting thing, though, that I imagine you guys would see at PagerDuty, and that is, look, when something hits the fan, something's wrong. A lot of times, the people who are using PagerDuty to be alerted and to monitor these things and to fix and rectify these things, they're not, with all due respect, they're not the person in product marketing or sales or what have you. They are the IT people who do need, let's call it, an enhanced level of access to whether the assets are in the cloud or on-prem or where have you. They are the people who maybe need the VPN or some sort of increased, as I said, enhanced level. Do you guys see that happening or not so much?
Um, we certainly have seen, yes, more people being forced to work from home and needing more access or different types of access than they
Right.
needed in the past.
Right.
So, I mean, I think the way we saw it in our data is lots of urgent requests to IT. Set me up with
Right.
this. I need that. Like that, there was a lot of that. Even that store example is an example of that.
Right. I mean, because again, not to think that IT people are superheroes. Maybe they are, but but a lot of, in order to keep the wheels turning. I mean, where would we be without an internet or without the cloud, without the Zooms and the Slacks and all of these things right now? It would be pretty lonely in the house. You'd have homicide rates going up, and divorces and everything else. So,
I was thinking about that and thinking just this morning, I was thinking if this had happened even 10 years ago or 5 years ago, I mean, there'd be no Disney Plus yet. Like
Right.
what would
The
people do
kids do,
with
yeah.
their kids, right?
I
Um,
agree. It's
the,
crazy.
the other thing we've seen, and you mentioned heroes, but we saw even with the increase of all these incidents, we actually saw in most cases that our customers are resolving them faster. So they've got more problems because there's more traffic, but they're actually getting to them and solving them faster. And I think that's probably a credit to the teams that they're set up right. They have the right tools in place, they have the right processes in place, and also that they know it's so important, right? That right now, when they have more traffic and people are stuck, and this is the only way that they can communicate, like I'd be lost without Zoom, being able to Zoom with my family. It's across the country, at least once a week, and friends. Like this is the way you have human.
I agree. I agree. Um, and really, look, as a tech dude, I'm really so happy to hear that because you know what? The internet has really, I mean, it was designed for a nuclear, Holocaust situation, right? A nuclear attacker would survive. So the internet has really kind of behaved and performed the way we would hope it would. And the cloud and the burstability and elasticity of cloud services have lived up to the bill for the most part. There's always little silly things, but I'm going to put another. I want to throw another theory at you, if you will. I think with so many people working from home, a lot of people are working longer, working harder. I know no one I speak to who's working, and I'm not. Look, thank God there's 26 million or whatever people who filed unemployment in the last 4 or 5 weeks, right? And for the most part in the tech industry, it hasn't been that bad. There are layoffs and everything else. But everyone I speak to who's working in the tech industry, they're like, we're so darn busy. We don't have time to look up here. It seems like we're working harder, longer, more than we did before this. And that may be a reason.
Yeah, and I've personally experienced that too. But yes, I've seen that. Like And I think it's for a couple reasons. One is that this is, as you said, unprecedented. Like no one really, you could guess it could happen, but no one really planned for it or predicted it. And so, we ourselves have been trying to figure out, what does this mean? What do we need to change? How do we work differently? I mean, imagine every single marketing team that is out there that suddenly has no physical events, and so their job has moved from being able to have a combination of physical events and online events to purely online events. That's a pretty big shift for an organization. And so there are shifts like that are happening across companies that have that are even more than just, I have to work from home now and work in a slightly different way. And so I think that that piece is maybe what's one of the reasons why it feels like we're all working harder. It's because we're trying to keep up our regular day jobs and also adjust to a very new
alien world. I mean, yeah, a very different environment. You're right. Hey, Rachel, we're about out of time. I want to thank you for joining us here on TechStrong TV. Tell all the PagerDuty folks, keep up the great work. They're one of the people helping to keep the lights on.
Thank you.
By enabling these other people who keep our lights on. Thank you. And, I hope to see PagerDuty at a conference soon one day. Who knows when, but they will come back, right?
Yes, we got tons of swag. We need a place to give it out.
You and us both, man. All right. Rachel, I'm going to mess up your last name because I can't even read it because this monitor is so far away. Obsletter.
Obsler.
Yeah? Obsler. All right, I was close. I even with my glasses, it's too far. But Rachel, thanks for joining us. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey, everyone. All right, this next segment features the CEO and co-founder of a recent company that just came out of stealth called Accurix, Sachin Agarwal. Sachin is he's a seasoned entrepreneur with several successful exits under his belt. They've got Clear Sky Ventures and some others behind this one. It just feels like one that feels like a company that we might be hearing more about. So this is Sachin, and why I say that, by the way, is because they seem to have a good handle on what the mission here is for DevSecOps. So let's hear what Sachin has to say, and we'll find out more.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on this segment. We're really happy right now to feature a new company just coming out of stealth. And CEO founder Sachin Agarwal is here to tell us about Sachin. I want to make sure I pronounce it correctly. Accurix?
That is correct. Accurix.
Okay. So Sachin, we were talking a little bit off camera, and I told you, I've been co-founder myself of several companies. I've never met a entrepreneur founder who was successful that didn't in some way think that what he was doing was going to help change the world. So tell us about your company and why you think it's going to help change the world.
Thank you, Alan, for the opportunity. And when we were calling the name Accurix, I didn't realize that it was going to be a tongue twister, right? So hopefully it'll become a household name, and Accurix will become Accurix, right? Anyway, you got it right,
Yep.
Alan. Every entrepreneur thinks starts with a dream. We all wake up to the same sky. Our horizons are not the same. We always say that idea is nobody's monopoly. So the way we look at the things, and in our little world about how enterprises or the organizations are adopting latest technologies, specifically cloud native, and we keep hearing about containers, service mesh, serverless. As enterprises adopt and embrace these new technologies, one thing that we are realizing is that their infrastructure is becoming increasingly immutable. And what I mean by that is, once the infrastructure is deployed, it is not modified. Right? We have looked at you have written a lot of blogs, a lot of articles about immutable infrastructure. You want to change it, fix it, modify it in any way, you need to rip it apart, and provision a new infrastructure. So recently, most modern enterprises or most modern immutable infrastructures are now being provisioned through code. We generally call them as infrastructure as code, and they are basically programmatically defining each layer in your stack, and they are declaratively defining and configuring your entire cloud native infrastructure. So the question then becomes, how do you secure an immutable infrastructure or an infrastructure that is completely always changing, always transient, always provisioned through code, right? So, of course, organizations have tried many things. They've tried to cobble together multiple solutions. They have tried to make few solutions work together and try to get a holistic view of their security risk assessment on this infrastructure. But it has not really worked. Evident from the fact that we keep seeing one high-profile breach, month after month, day after day, and they have not stopped. So what are we missing, right? And that's where I feel, and I strongly believe, back to your question about what's the big dream, why we think will change the world, because we think, or I strongly believe, that the way to secure or way to protect your immutable infrastructure is to adopt a paradigm of immutable security. Now, I bring in a new word called immutable security. Now, what does that mean, right? So let's break it down into three parts. First, you need to take a look at your entire cloud stack. So not just your cloud resources, provider resources, such as your S3 buckets, EC2 instances in AWS, whatever that is, right? Don't just look at those. Look at your Kubernetes, look at your service mesh, look at your serverless, whatever is composing your intent of deploying your infrastructure. So full stack. Second big point is code to cloud. Now, because your cloud is built on the left, right? The entire stack gets built on the left through infrastructure as code. You need a view of a security from code moving to the cloud. So going from left to the right, but not just doing left, not just doing right, but covering the whole DevOps lifecycle of saying code to cloud. And that's where Accurix stands for, code to cloud. And the third, I think, in my view, the biggest differentiator or the biggest need for the market is to ensure posture drift detection, potential drift that you have or you could have in your intent versus actual that is running in the cloud. So how do you basically ensure a posture assurance or drift prevention so that when you are moving from your code to cloud, you're completing your journey and maintaining the immutability of your infrastructure and therefore immutability of your security posture?
Got it. So to me, when we look at things that are immutable in technology, right? Immutable infrastructure, now you're coining immutable security. These are all possible because of software, because with immutable, we don't, you can't, hardware is too expensive to throw away. But software, we can always, recycle, if you will, and it becomes immutable. So I'm going to assume then that the Accurix solution is totally software, right? And that today it goes across containers, meshes, VM hypervisor, cloud, on-prem, bare metal, serverless, whatever. It makes no difference because as long as it can run software, it can run your security product. Is that fair?
So that is fair, Alan. I just want to bring you back to seeing what's really happening in the industry. Customers or enterprises are provisioning this cloud or the whole stack through code. Right? Before, you would have a programmer writing in his own isolation, writing his business logic and throwing his code, which will solve a business problem. But today, we are requiring that developer or that programmer to not just write his application code, but we're requiring him to provision his infrastructure. Today, these programmers have a lot more privileges, a lot more access to the infrastructure than they originally had. And you have covered this in multiple articles talking about DevOps and the rise of all those technologies. The real question is that when you are looking of all the code that is not your business application, but all the code that is provisioning, declaratively defining, and programmatically provisioning those layers, that's the code that we talk about and saying, okay, now that code is got to be mutable, got to be making sure that whatever is provisioning on the right is not changing or breaking the principles of immutability.
Got it. Got it. And so now, how do you package this? I guess is my question. Is this something that gets built into the CI/CD pipeline? So we're starting left, as you mentioned, and going all the way to right. So it's looking at code from putting it into a Git or some sort of repository. It's looking at it from there all the way through to deployment and then post-deployment.
Great question, Alan, and obviously we should have talked about it as well. So now we are entering into programmers' world, right? And historically, we have seen that programmers really don't care about security, right? I mean, we have seen in the past that, okay, you're going to touch my process, you're going to bring in new guardrails to what I'm doing, then thank you very much, right? So, yeah. So yes, Securix, the way we do it, the way we envision the use of this software is when the programmer, before he even checks in his code, so on a pre-commit basis, he's written his source code wherever on his local machine, for example, he can actually download or implement a command line interface. By the way, we are coming with a free version, in this week. And by the time, of course, we get to, by the time we wrap this up, you'll see that Accuracy is live, and we have a freemium version running and generally available to the market. But coming back to your question, we can enter in many places. We can enter at pre-commit phase. So basically, when the developer has his code on his own local machine, we can come in at the Git repositories or the code repositories that you just mentioned. So we have a Git plugin with GitLab, Bitbucket, all the major code repositories. They're available today. And the third thing we can come in is as a Jenkins or a CI/CD pipeline. Let's say people do not want to integrate Accuracy platform into their code repository. So we can still come in once your code is compiled, even at a binary level. Yeah. So basically, we made it easy for adoption and implementation, putting no agents, making no source code changes, getting only read-only access, so we don't really touch your world.
Excellent. So let me ask you then, if you don't mind, I'm asking another question. So one of the trends that we've been seeing is that, as you highlighted, not only are developers have the ability, more than the ability, they actually wind up doing a lot of the deployment, a lot of the, initiating that whole CI/CD process. They're also taking some responsibility for security, right? Because ultimately no one raises their hand and says, I want to develop insecure code, right? Everyone wants, I develop quality code, and maybe quality synonymous. So, but the key to making them successful, right? And that's what it's about. If they're not going to be successful, you don't win. The key to making them successful is giving them tools that are aimed at them, not at necessarily the security pro, right? A security pro or security admin has a different view of this whole process than the developer who is, hey, I got to develop and deploy, right? That's their world. So to be successful, a security product that lives in that world has to be kind of geared to what's important to them, to their level of knowledge and appreciation for the security. And I'm wondering if you guys took that into account. Who's your real user here, if you will?
Yeah, and I think you again hit upon a very right point that what's the value? Developer wants to bring out a quality code, and quality is not necessarily always aligned with security objectives. But how do you then introduce the concept of security and telling the programmer that it makes you look good and it makes your enterprise safer to operate in the world that we live in? few things, right? So first is when the developer is writing his code, think of it as a blueprint to what he's going to deploy in the code, deploy on the cloud. What we are doing as a first step to help support the developers, we are giving them a visualization or a topology of what would it look like if they deployed this set of code with this declarative language, this definitions, this configurations, what would the cloud look like? So it's a topological view, a very nice navigatable click-through visualization of their to-be blueprint of the cloud. And the value for that for them is that they can of course see how their resources are stacked up. Are they following the best practices, which I think refers back to being a good quality code, not necessarily security, but we think when we implement those best practices, actually you are making your cloud more secure. And one of the examples could be, putting your S3 bucket in the same subnet or your storage in the same subnet, where there could be another application running which is sort of exposed to internet. And we keep hearing about those kind of hacks where some security groups are open to internet, and then there's some S3 buckets which are not encrypted, and we still keep hearing those hacks. My view is that give that visualization, give the power that the developer already has today to play with the cloud configurations, to provision those infrastructure layers, and give them those visualizations so that they can see what's happening in the infrastructure, which I think is very powerful. Once they see that, I think they implement best practices, and in doing so, they are actually incorporating the policies that the security organization of that enterprise may have set it up for them. So we make it sort of look like that, hey, developer, we are coming in to help you in your world to make sure that you are following the best practices as you deploy your cloud infrastructure, which will reduce your cost, create efficiency, create scalability, give you elasticity that you're looking for. At the same time, when you combine those best practices, hey, by the way, you're also deploying it in a secured and a confident fashion. So the question really for the developer is, okay, you want to scale, you want to innovate freely, but can you do it with confidence and without fear? And once we get the message around, I think they will appreciate the necessity, the need for bringing security early on into the process.
Excellent. I'm going to pivot a little bit. We only have a few minutes left, but I feel compelled to. I'm sure when you guys were planning the launch of the company, you weren't planning on a worldwide pandemic and everything going on that we see going on. How has this affected the launch and your planning going forward?
Very timely question, Alan. And again, it is humbling experience. Firstly, I think I'm humbled and honored to be backed by a tier one of the best VCs I could look for. Clear Sky Ventures is led a round of financing, very supportive during these times. My biggest, but I had two challenges. One is, how do I create a startup culture, the company which is just coming out of stealth, in the times that we are in, and people working remote, virtual, with their dogs barking in the background, kids doing their homeworks.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
So all this is crazy. And when I look at those things and saying, okay, firstly, how do I build a culture that we all can be proud of, and saying, hey, now we are working towards a common vision and a common mission. So that was a thing in our head. And second is, obviously, we are seeing a very different world today where enterprises are thinking about, you're talking to me, but how about the guy we talk to may not be having a job tomorrow, right? So I think that is an opportunity because we are seeing that COVID-19 has pushed people to think beyond the boundaries. I think we are thinking of new normal. I actually think that it is accelerating the cloud adoption and people realizing that the virtual world is for real. Even though after we come out on the other side of COVID-19, I think people will realize that we needed cloud more than we ever needed. But the question then becomes, when developers are working remotely from their homes, when they are remotely dialing into or using their infrastructure, enterprise infrastructure from their homes, how do they know that I can innovate at that scale freely without someone slowing me down, without security breach happening before me making the headline? I actually feel that we want to become the flag bearers and the torch bearers of saying, hey guys, if you have a great idea, there cannot be perfect time. We can all become the signal of normalcy and hope that we can bring to this community and saying there is better world, right? And I think there is no better time to launch a company and bring the sense of normalcy and hope.
I think that's an excellent answer, and I agree with you 100%. I was lucky or unlucky enough to So I started one company. My first IT company was right when I guess the recession of 88, 89, then 90. It was right in those early to mid 90s. The internet was not yet commercial. It was, there was still, I don't even think there was the web yet. And then I launched another company, my second one, or third one, right after 9/11 in November, October of 2001. And then I left that company right around 2009, after the recession of '08, and started what became this company. And I will tell you, I think if there's a perfect time to start a company, it's when you have this sort of upheaval, when you have choppy waters, and people are looking. I think because that's the time that people are willing to look at different solutions, to think differently about things, to look for a new way of doing things. So, I think I hope it'll work out well for you. And
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. And just to on that note, by the way, I have a similar experience. This is my fifth startup, and my first startup was in Asia, in Singapore, which when I witnessed 96, 97, downturn, financial tsunami, as they called it, right? Yeah. And then 9/11, then 2008 subprime crisis. So I had my first three ventures back to back in the midst of crisis. And I think crisis presents us with a new, unique opportunity. And I feel that if you have a right value to the enterprises and you're solving a real problem that people have, there's no perfect world. There's no perfect timing for it. So this is now.
Absolutely.
We got to do it now. Yeah.
I agree with you. Anyway, Sachin, we wish you well. We'll have you maybe back on in a month or two, or if we're, maybe one day we'll go to conferences. Maybe we'll meet in person there again. But until then, good luck with the launch. Oh, you know what I should mention? For people who want more information, where can they go?
So basically, we are launching, so we are going live as of Tuesday, 28th of April. They can just go to our website. On the website, they can just click a button saying, start your free version. So it's not a free trial. It's a freemium, full stack product. And again, it's a developer community edition. We feel that it'll be good for the developers to use our platform and feel secure about using it. So yeah, they can just go to our website and start using the software. It's available, generally available. It is free, and it requires no credit card, no authorization. You don't even have to sign up with that. You can use your Git login. You can use your Bitbucket login, whatever you're comfortable with. Keep it simple, and you're ready to go.
Fantastic. Okay, that's going to wrap this episode up. We'll be back soon with our next guest. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right. For our next session, I'm talking to Ralph Van Beek from Robobank, and this is at an IBM Think conference in 2018. But I want to tell you something, that the whole subject of mainframe computers, enterprise systems, and DevOps, at first I got sort of a bad rap with that whole bifurcated IT thing where, we're going to do all our DevOps and fast stuff here in the cloud, and we're going to leave behind the slow kids on the mainframes. Nothing could be further from the truth. If anything, we really had made these mainframes, walk the walk and talk the talk. Ralph and his team at Robobank were one of the first people I had spoken to that really were doing significant CI/CD DevOps type of functionality on mainframes. And I think you'll enjoy this talk, and we'll go back to it. It is from, as I mentioned, IBM Think 2018. Ralph Van Beek from Robobank. Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel of DevOps.com and DevOps TV, and we're here at IBM Think 2018 at the Mandalay Bay, Las Vegas. I'm joined by usually if there's an IBM event, this is what, your third one with us now, Ralph? Yep. Ralph Van Beek, DevOps at Rabobank, and of course, that covers a lot of sins, Ralph, right?
Yep.
When we say, why don't you share a little bit, what exactly do you do in your role?
Well, what I do in my role, we decided at Rabobank that we need to professionalize the automation of the IT process in a similar way that we treat our business process. So developing them under architecture, looking to the process, and from there making the rest of your architecture. And I started with this some 4 years ago. Primarily focusing on the payments area within the Rabobank, which is some 70% Z, 30% distributed platforms, and well, trying to meld this together as one integrated and automated process.
Sure. And Ralph, over the last, well, this, as I said, is the third year, but in the last 2 years, we've spoken a lot about Rabobank and the transformation and what was driving it and stuff like that. But I wanted to focus this year's talk, if we can, to a little bit about mainframes and how, the shift left that we see in cloud-based DevOps, let's say, is a little bit different with mainframes. The idea of testing and so forth, also a little bit different with mainframes. And, for those of you listening and watching, make no mistake about it, the financial industry still runs on mainframes, right?
It is, yep.
And it's not going to change anytime soon. So let's talk a little bit, and obviously you can't talk about things you can't talk about, right? But let's give our viewers a little background into DevOps, mainframes, testing, shift left, Rabobank.
Okay. Well, thanks. To start with, we are dedicated to go full DevOps, automate everything where it is possible. There's a big business need for that. I mean, our customers are driving us to come with new services. We've got the fintech movement and things like that, and that also hits the mainframe. So we need to speed up. We need to be more agile. So we start to adopt most of the mantras from DevOps, also applying them to the mainframe. And at one point, when it is regarding to testing, we found out that you run into challenges. If you look to the typical architecture of mainframe applications, and perhaps I shouldn't say mainframe applications, but it's more about transaction processing systems, they have an architecture which is designed for stability, it's designed for scalability, for consistency of data. This leads to an architecture which is much more integrated. So now the DevOps mantra says you should modularize smaller chunks of functionality, test it individually. And we found out that, well, although we are striving for that, we still end up with a considerable amount of end-to-end tests that is basically inevitable due to the architecture of the application. Now that's not typically mainframe, it has to do with the transaction processing nature, but as these transaction processing applications usually tend to run on mainframe, this is becoming an impediment for going full automated. So.
Yeah, and so Ralph, what has been the approach at Rabobank with this?
It's a couple of components. To start with, try to avoid end-to-end tests as much as possible. That still stays. But then at the point that you do have a need for end-to-end tests, and that can be due to the architecture, but also to the related risk, we try to shorten them as much as possible. So not trying to have full copies of the entire company application landscape, but then focus on. So there's a lot of to do with virtualization of services. The second big chunk is about having consistent data in these environments, which is something that we do with a couple of IBM products, which is it's Optim, it's Hades, it's DataStage, and we have set up a capability, a test data fabrication process where we, in an industrialized manner, supply consistent end-to-end testing data. Now, together with the story of last year, which is about application deployment, and then having an organization around that, means that we are now in a situation that we have dramatically improved our capability in end-to-end testing. I mean, I've spoken to customers or to other IBM customers here over the last day, spending over a month for an end-to-end test.
Yeah.
We now have a single end-to-end test environment where we run 60 end-to-end tests a month, each month. High scale, we're using RIT for high performance virtualization, doing some 200 million virtualizations each month. So this is, I mean, 60 tests a month may sound small, but we are talking about end-to-end tests.
Yeah, when you're talking about end-to-end, and for our listeners, let's be clear about that. We're not just talking about running a test on a new snippet of code. You're talking about end-to-end tests on enterprise-level applications.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, that are on both systems of engagement, system of record. So this is not an easy I mean, in the old way of doing things, this would take weeks, if not months, right, to do that kind of test on an app.
It is. Yeah. It's one of the things we found out is if you look to the steps you take in automation, automating the provisioning of your infrastructure, then automating the deployment of your application, that all doesn't make sense if after that I still need 6 to 8 weeks to completely configure my environment. So if that's still old style craftsmanship work, you will never get to the agility that that your customers basically demand from you.
Absolutely. So Ralph, let's if you don't mind, you've been to these IBM conferences now for a number of years. You speak to other practitioners, organizations who have representatives here. This year, we're seeing maybe it's a little different in the way it's organized around how we're doing. When we talk about DevOps, we talk about automation, we talk about testing, continuous type of stuff. And we're seeing it sort of, my take, we're seeing these ideas being embedded, if you will, into artificial intelligence, security, business in general, right? So it's not just where in years past it was almost doing DevOps for DevOps sake. Now it's about, hey, you use these DevOps means, these ways of that we call DevOps as part of what you're doing, in a bigger arc, which is business processes, right? And so I wonder, like, here you are, right? You're director of DevOps or at the bank. How does that fit in now in this new kind of way that we look at, business?
Well, if I just look to my agenda over the last couple of weeks, you can see that same happening. DevOps is more or less becoming the natural way of doing things, but it also means that it is more and more integrated with other common practices. I think over the last weeks I spent quite some time on GDPR and the entire.
You're not the only one.
I'm sure, but the challenge now is how to get all this security with how to safeguard your data, and at the same time not hitting all the advantages that you had in automating your testing process. Because to some level extent, you need to have production-like data. I'm not
Yeah.
saying production data, production-like data. So that's already one challenge. But another challenge, if it is about the AI, that's one of the main topic here. We are exploring ideas of how can we now, in the initial stage of testing, use AI to define our test criteria, to distill requirements from the business processes into what do we now
Right.
have to test, which is still, I mean, application design is still rather
More
uh,
art than science.
yeah, but also not really integrated with the automation of the rest of the
No,
process. And that's-
absolutely not.
Yeah.
I want to just, because some of our listeners at home may not realize how big a thing you brought up, and that is this idea of how GDPR affects test data,
Yeah.
right? Because it used to be prior, well, GDPR doesn't come into effect till May 23rd
May
or
25th,
25th,
yeah.
May 25th. It used to be you can grab subsets of your own data
Yeah.
and run tests on that,
Yeah.
right, to make sure that it worked and so
Yeah.
forth. Under GDPR, you got to be careful doing that, right? That could be a huge violation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that data is real, subject to GDPR. If something happens, I mean,
Yeah.
the fines here are,
Yeah, they
Punitive,
They,
beyond
they
punitive.
really hurt. Yeah.
yeah, they could,
Yeah.
I mean, we see it in our own stuff. So the idea now of coming up with viable test data that is pseudo realistic has become a challenge
Yeah.
for many organizations, or
Yeah.
will become a challenge for many organizations as we move forward in GDPR. Ralph, any other? I mean, it's only one day here, and to think any other sort of observations or kind of eureka moments that came to mind in talking to people?
Well, I'm looking a lot at cloud developments. One of the challenges that I see is how to combine Cloud4Z together with this challenge of all these test environments. You have these test environments that are populated, that are an asset in itself, and so here's cloud. You want to spin up, spin down your environment, and here's your test environment with a lot of investment in it, and you don't want to get that away.
Right.
There's tension between those two, and so I'm looking for solutions for that, and to see how can we just combine, because they are both great concepts.
They're both great concepts, and they can both help each other, right?
Yeah.
The trick, as you said, is instead of doing this, right?
Yeah.
And so, wouldn't it be great to leverage the elasticity of the cloud, right, for testing scalability, while still using this, not only the infrastructure but the know-how, the whole process, the whole our whole way of doing business. We don't have to throw that out. You don't want to throw that baby with the bathwater. Can we just leverage right here to make this better?
Yeah.
Of course,
Well,
devil's in the details there.
I think the nice thing about this cloud movement is it more or less forces you, it triggers you to do your homework. So if you haven't got the management of your environments well in place, and I mean with management, I'm not talking about the infrastructure as such, but the entire pillar from
Right.
infrastructure, application, and your entire set of testware, then it will hinder you. You won't be cloud ready enough to just make that
Right,
that step.
to do. And what you just described there, Ralph, it really goes to the nitty-gritty, the heart of what we call hybrid cloud,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Which is leveraging cloud without throwing out years and millions, if not billions of dollars in investment we've made in our infrastructure. I remember being here, I guess it was 3 years ago, interviewing a major client of IBM who was moving to the cloud. And what they were doing is, as they would turn on a service in the cloud, they would just shut down the service on-prem. Seemed, very radical approach, incredibly wasteful, right? How do you throw out, in this case it was 50 years for them of stuff, to start with a greenfield here, right?
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem natural, right? I see this, so I live in Florida, as you know. When they redo the landscaping, they chop down beautiful 30, 40, 50-year-old trees. They just chop them down and replace them with new trees that'll grow. Why would you chop down a tree? It's the same thing here.
Apart from that, a lot of these old stuff, these things evolved over time with very good reasons. There's a lot of thinking in that, and the way things are set up is usually for very good reasons. So it's not wrong to chop down a tree once in a while when it's in the middle of the road, but at the same time, you should make conscious decisions on that.
You know, but sometimes, Ralph, I think to myself, Alan, are you getting old?
Well, we have the same color hair.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. But is this the new way of out with the old, in with the new, and these legacy? Look, some of these people think mainframes are legacy, but that's their problem. But do we put too much investment into preserving these legacy things just because they worked then?
Yeah, well, getting to my initial message, I think there's a lot of misconception in this. If you talk to mainframes are given bad names, so it's monolith, it's legacy, etc. But again, we redesigned our payment systems completely greenfield.
I remember.
Started to rebuild them on mainframe with COBOL, with a brand new architecture, but because of consistency, because of performance, because of scalability, we ended up with an architecture which was much more modularized, but still the very core of processing still had the same monolith characteristics. Not because it's an old-fashioned way of designing, but because it's a prerequisite to be this performant and this.
It was the best solution.
Yep.
I mean, that's another thing I think we lose a lot of times when especially in technology and IT, where we suffer from shiny trinket syndrome. We always want the hot new thing.
Yep.
Is that just because there's a hot new thing doesn't mean the old thing was necessarily all bad, right? And like everything else in life, it's about finding the balance, right? Of how do you leverage that. So, anyway, I'm glad to see you. You're on the front lines of this at Rabobank, and you do a great job with it. Thanks so much for being our guest here today.
Pleasure to be here.
Enjoy the rest of Think.
Okay.
Ralph Van Beek, Rabobank, here at IBM Think 2018. This is Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com and DevOps TV. Have a great day. Okay, everyone. Well, it's time now for the news. As usual, I'm going to just give you a couple of the headlines and articles from our sites. You should really go to the sites themselves for more. But let me highlight one or two for today. On Security Boulevard, we have the Supreme Court agrees to hear cases on what computer trespass means. And this isn't what you may think it is. A computer trespass may mean a government agency taking your computer and accessing your information without your permission. It may mean an employer-employee or contractor situation. It could mean a family member, friend, or even a stranger, accessing your computer and files and information. What exactly is computer trespass? And it is a good, I think everyone's going to be looking to see how the court comes down on this. And sometimes it takes a while for the judiciary to catch up to technology. So whatever they rule on now, and however they rule, it may be subject to change as the judiciary sort of catches up to the technology. Another one I wanted to bring out was just a good overview of cloud security challenges in 2020. That is on Security Boulevard. Check it out. It's a good one. Let's move over now to Container Journal. The Term project has come out with 2.0, advances in container image scanning, and I'd recommend taking a look at that. And then over on DevOps.com, two ones for you. DevOps trends for 2020 and beyond. Again, one of these trend articles that proved to be very popular. And then one on, speaking of popular, coronavirus impact. enterprises must focus on what works. I think it is good to be focused on what works during choppy times like this. But as I've said in the past, I think it's also a good time to try to find out what works and try new things as well. But read the article, and I think you'll see for yourself. As I mentioned, this is not an exhaustive list. Please check out DevOps.com, Container Journal, Security Boulevard, for a complete listing of our latest stories and news and features. But just wanted to give you a taste of it here today. We're going to take a commercial, and then we'll be right back and over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor.
I got the burgers. I went to Bun Barn, Beef Patty Palace, Tomato Town.
Oh, thanks for getting all this, honey.
No problem. Getting all of it just took about 2 hours.
I just wish there was an easier way to get all your burger fixings from one place, you know?
Wow.
Dad, you didn't go to Mayo King?
You know our car doesn't fit in their drive-thru. I went to Mustard Chef.
I hate this burger.
He also went to ketchup.
When you're building something using components that don't work together easily, things could get ugly, fast. You wouldn't live like this, so don't make your DevOps team live like this.
This lack of burger cohesion is hard on all of us, Cheryl.
GitLab is the only single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle.
Okay, back here now is we're going to hand things over to our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon, who has two great interviews today with Robert Beans and Mike Hamilton, former CISO of CI Security. So, Charlene, over to you.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Thanks, Alan. Welcome back, everybody, to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, managing editor at Media Ops. And the topic of privacy has been top of mind, I think, since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. Actually, before then, but I think people are really thinking about it these days with everything that's going on, you know, between hackers kind of barging in on the Zoom and the other collaboration platforms, to the government being able to kind of track our location using geolocation tracking for the contact tracking apps that Apple and Google are putting together. A lot of people are really kind of wondering where they stand from a privacy perspective. And so my next guest is Robert E.G. Beans, who is CEO of StartPage, and he's here to kind of help us walk through that whole privacy morass that we're now dealing with. Robert, thank you so much for taking the time and talking with me today. Surely do appreciate it.
My pleasure, Charlene.
Great. So can we start actually by you telling me a little bit about your company, so we have a little bit of background?
Sure. StartPage.com is a privacy search engine. Actually, it's the privacy search engine that started very early on in 2005. We started to think about the privacy aspects of a search engine. If you collect people's searches and you're able to put them together, it's a huge privacy issue, because you're able to profile people, you're able to see who they are, what their interests are, what their hobbies are, their fears, their passion, everything in life you can see through those searches. So we took a drastic step. We've been a search engine since 1998, and we took a drastic step in 2006 and launched StartPage as the first and world's most private search engine, as we claim it is. We think privacy is extremely important. Every human being has a basic right to privacy. We feel it's a fundamental right, and we say you have nothing to hide, but you have so much to protect. Privacy indeed is a hot topic these days with any tech discussion, and I think it'll be that way for many years to come. So in 2006, we launched as StartPage the most private search engine. If you want to summarize it, I'd say we don't track you, we don't profile you. No ads that follow you around over the internet because you search with StartPage. You're basically anonymous searching with us. The good thing is that we're unique in the sense that we are the only ones who have Google results. So you get the quality results of Google with the added privacy features of Start Page. That's in a nutshell what we do.
Excellent, excellent. Well, one of the things that we've been hearing a lot about is, as I said before, the location tracking or the contact tracking that Google and Apple are collaborating on. But it seems kind of an invasion, or just kind of at least for some people might not be very comfortable with the idea of the government actually knowing where they are at all times. And you say that that we should have a level of privacy in everything we do and where we go, and obviously the location trackers can be turned off on our phones. But you said that there's kind of a loophole that software security or software companies have through the Cloud Act and the Privacy Shield, and how the Cloud Act can actually undermine the Privacy Shield, and those are two concepts maybe that not a lot of people are aware of. So I think maybe it might be a good start to kind of define what the Cloud Act is and what the Privacy Shield is, and really what that means for consumer data.
Sure, important topic. Maybe it's good to go back a little bit in history and quickly scan through what happened since 2001, when, of course, we had the 9/11 attacks. The US government was quite quick to come up with the US Patriot Act.
Right.
Gave the US government far-reaching powers to tap information. And it took the whole society to at least 12 years to find out through the revelations of Snowden that there was a big privacy issue. And then there was a problem for the EU, because many tech companies are US tech companies. And so the EU had to come up with a legal framework to regulate and justify personal data transfer between the EU and the US, and they came up with the safe harbor regulation, basically saying it's okay because the US must comply with certain conditions to be fulfilled, and then it's okay to have your personal data flow to US companies. Then Max Schrems, a privacy campaigner from Austria, he fought a battle against Facebook, and eventually he won in the EU Court of Justice, when it was decided that the safe harbor regulation didn't have enough provisions to safeguard consumers' privacy. That was replaced then by a privacy shield in 2016 that had some more conditions to be fulfilled and had some stricter conditions. But then there was a discussion between Microsoft and the US government, and it was about emails that were stored on a server in Ireland, and the US government said we want to have access to that communication in Ireland under the current US law. And at that moment there was a discussion. Microsoft said we don't want to give it. And then a couple of weeks later the US Cloud Act was signed. It was in, I think, March of 2018. When that gives law enforcement the power to access communication content stored in Ireland or anywhere else under US law. And that put the tech companies in a bit of a stretch, because on the one side they have GDPR in Europe, a very good set of privacy regulations that tend to and try to protect consumers' privacy. On the other hand, they had this Cloud Act undermining it, so they're kind of torn in between, and it's very hard to decide for them which law they're violating, I guess. And a situation that's quite unacceptable, I think, in the long run.
So is the data strictly data that is on consumers in other countries, European countries, or does that include American data as well? Or there data on Americans as well?
It basically includes data on Americans as well. Okay,
all right. So at first glance, it sounds like, well, this is this is overseas, so this is not quote unquote our problem. But it sounds like we need to be as aware because obviously we're a global community of users, and so
We are.
our data is everywhere.
And the global community is more and more one community where exceptions and local applications of laws don't really matter. Eventually, it's going to be one global community that needs to protect their consumer privacy.
Right. So what does that mean then for our data privacy rights as Americans and as global citizens? Because if the U.S. can actually, law enforcement agencies can access that data, and the government, it sounds like we don't really have any expectation of privacy anymore.
And we should have, and that's of course where StartPage tries to play a role since 2006. We try to offer an option for people who are caring about their privacy and they want to have options. They have a good option and to replace the regular search engine with startpage.com. And there's many privacy respecting tools that try to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And especially with the COVID-19 effect taking place in the world now, of course, there's two effects with COVID-19. You have on the one side, everyone's home working and there's all sorts of safety and security and privacy aspects to that. And it's also the apps that the governments are trying to use to fight and mitigate the effects of COVID-19. And with a lot of political but also popular pressure to do that, privacy seems to be temporarily put on a second plan, which has a lot of dangers in my view. On the one side, of course, it's a big crisis we're in altogether with COVID-19, and everyone is willing to help the local health services to mitigate the effects. But there's three elements that they're trying to do. Basically, they're trying to have medical information together with location information. And once they find out where you've been and the medical situation, if you're catching the virus, then they want to go back and say who have you been in contact with through your location device, and try to warn those people. And given the urgency and the fear in the world today, many people are eager to embrace those tools and say we'll do anything possible to get us back to a normal world. Right. But let's by all means also consider the privacy aspects of it, because we have such a bad example in 911, which created the Patriot Act, which basically showed that the whole world was then under surveillance. Mm-hmm. And that's an extremely negative effect. Of course, using those technical tools, they have to be, I think they have to be temporarily, they have to be necessary, and it has to be evaluated medically. You have to be proven to have an effect, mm-hmm. and they need to be proportionate, and that's important and essential to keep track of them also when the pandemic is over eventually, that such extraordinary measures are not continued, because it's very easy to become the new normal and continue to keep tracking people's whereabouts and whatever medical information they're carrying. And I think that's very important to do. It could result in ongoing mass surveillance eventually if we don't watch out.
Right. That's exactly what I was thinking is, do we become so inured to the idea of having the government or any other organization track our location and have access to our data if it comes to that. At what point do we become just comfortable with that idea, and what does that mean for us as a society as a whole if we if we really don't have that expectation of privacy any longer?
Very important.
I think
we just have to look at China to see what is possible in a negative sense.
Yeah. It's it actually is kind of scary when you think about the idea that a pandemic could actually change the way people view many different, there changes their whole mindset regarding a number of different things, from privacy to security to what they're willing to give up to be safe. And it's really kind of fascinating. So what are some of the things then? I mean, you talked a little bit about Smart Page, but what are some of the Start Page? What are some of the other things that folks might be able to do to kind of protect themselves and their data and privacy in general, not just now, but kind of moving forward?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the most important things is become aware and get yourself up to speed what's out there. There's all sorts of websites that you can go to, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, for instance, or you can visit websites like privacytools.io for information on which tools are more privacy-centric and how they work and function. So you can find privacy alternatives like StartPage for what you're using today. Mm-hmm. There's general things to do having to concern security, like keeping your software updated or never click on emails, mm-hmm. Use a browser like Firefox, or those kind of things that are important. Yeah, there's many things that you can find on the internet to start taking the first steps. A private search engine is, by the way, a very easy step to take, because mm-hmm. it's always difficult if you replace some tool by a privacy-centric tool that has been designed with privacy in mind. You want the same convenience, and you want the same. It must be easy. And it's not always easy also because of the network effect to change your current tool you're using by something else. For search engines, it's quite easy. Sure. It's one click and you're done. Okay. And it's a great start.
All right, great. I would also add that make sure that any information that you are getting is from a trusted source, because there's a lot of bad information out there. So.
That's true.
Okay, Robert. Well, thank you very much for having this discussion with me. Lots of good things to ponder when it comes to our privacy, and I'm sure this is not a topic that we'll be forgetting about anytime soon. I have a feeling there will be many more conversations related to privacy and privacy tracking, data tracking, location tracking, and just the state of the union as it comes when it comes to privacy. So thank you again for your time. Really do appreciate it.
My pleasure, Shelley.
Great. Well, guys, stick around. We've got more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Thanks, Alan. Welcome back to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I am here now with Mike Hamilton, who is the former CISO for the City of Seattle, and he's now co-founder of a company called CI Security. And we are going to be talking about some of the things that CISOs need to keep in mind as they kind of enter their planning for the post-pandemic work from home paradigm. So Mike, thanks so much for taking a couple minutes and talking with me today. I really do appreciate it.
All right, thanks for having me, Charlene.
Awesome, awesome. So first, let's talk a little bit about exactly what phase 2 means. Obviously, phase 1, companies kind of had to, throw themselves into it without a whole lot of planning. So what does phase 2 actually mean?
Well, I think the whole phase lexicon is a little arbitrary, but what we're talking about is the great returning.
Mm-hmm.
There's a variety of circumstances under which people had to say, okay, go work at home. And that could have been, here's your managed device. It could be, here's your unmanaged device. It could be, use your home computer. So especially for that middle condition there, that you are on an unmanaged device, there's the possibility of coming back in with crud that you picked up.
Right.
And I think that's what, the whole phase 2 thing is all about, is how do we safely reintroduce all of these assets back into corporate networks?
Okay, all right. So what are some of the things that both CIOs and CISOs need to consider as they are coming up with their phase 2 planning?
Yeah, sure. Well, so, there's the obvious thing, right? We don't want to introduce junk into the network. But having some kind of quarantine process, I think, is reasonably straightforward. There's a few social aspects of this that I think it should be considered, right? Everybody was just told, go home, build a home network that works. And, not everybody is capable of doing that. So some people have been working under frustrating conditions and have probably had to, kind of bailing wire some solutions together. And so, be kind to the people that are bringing back in the cruddy computers, right? They just went through a bad thing too.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think that there's a couple of research opportunities that are worth thinking about as well. I don't know how many companies have the latitude to say, okay, let's take all of those systems and let's image them forensically in a sound way, and so that we can use those for research, or just kind of writ large research for the sake of research, give them to an academic institution or something like that. But there's also, remember, the introduction of some kind of malware, some kind of ransomware that's now hiding in the network could have been introduced already, depending on your network architecture and how you're doing, remote access and things like this, and how managed that endpoint was. Patient zero could already be out there, and that may have already been introduced over the network. And so if there's evidence of that, you don't want to destroy it, because potentially, if there are crimes committed, nation state acts, things like that, you're going to want to lean on your insurance company. Hopefully you're covered for things like that, but you're going to need to be able to demonstrate with evidence, kind of a forensic chain of events. So not destroying things on the way in could be important for your business if you believe that there is evidence there that you would like to preserve, or if there's research potential with the devices coming back in.
Okay, all right. So I guess the obvious question then is, how do you do that without infecting every other piece, endpoint, laptop, whatever device on the network in the process?
Yeah, well, there's a good deal of kind of construction of this type of list going on. And in fact, right now I'm working with a colleague of mine over at Costco, and we're doing this for our regional InfraGard chapter. We are both section chiefs, and we're helping to advise state emergency operations. One of those things is all the computers that are going to come back, and specifically talking about government systems, because governments didn't really have the ability to, set up a bunch of laptops and send them out in the field and they're all managed. If anything, you got a device, but, you're kind of on your own with it. So we're putting together what we think is a reasonable list, but there's a number of things to think about. When these things come in, should there be a quarantine network set aside so that we can observe these for a while? What's the policy going to be about trying to clean a system versus flatten and reimage it, right? What's the policy on, under what circumstances do we preserve a forensically sound image? So what we're working with is kind of a risk-based way of doing this. And remember, there may be a lot of these coming in, and this could be pretty resource intensive. So, using a risk-based approach and being able to kind of delineate what it's safe to ignore is probably a good thing to do, right? So having a questionnaire where you can score the risk coming in, right? Did user have access to information classified by the organization as confidential or secret, or whatever your classification scheme is? Was the device under management? Has this device been connected to wireless networks? Were any of those public networks? You don't want to dive into the details about how strong is your wireless password at home, but I mean, so questions like this start to give you the ability to delineate which ones are, we really need to watch this thing as it comes in, versus clean it up and get back to work. Some of these you're going to want to preserve forensically. So I will point out too that a running computer may have something in its memory that you need to preserve. So taking a snapshot of memory before shutting the thing down, if you really want to get into the weeds of, forensic examination. But so prior to intake, right, make sure you have enough supplies and technical products that are ready to go for imaging, right? Make sure network monitoring is up to speed, because if you're going to put them on a quarantine network, you're going to want to watch them, right? Watch their network activity. And then there should be a high-risk intake process, and maybe all of those get imaged. And there's a low-risk intake process where, and I'm surprised I need to say this so often, but when you're going to clean a computer and you want to use a tool to do that, you have to use a tool that's different from the running antivirus tool on the computer. Because if that would have caught it, that would have caught it.
Right.
Right? And it's just amazing. Okay, well, we'll just run a scan with the antivirus. No. So making sure that you have, those tools handy, right? Like, I'm not going to call out any vendors, but there's a lot of good vendors that are good for the accessory, the once in a while scan of a system, just to kind of double check what you have running. Right. So a risk-based questionnaire to figure out if you're you go through the high-risk intake process or the low-risk intake process, and then processes for each one of those that frankly are going to be individual to your organization.
Okay. All right. So then thinking about, the fact that organizations had to get their employees set up for remote work in a real hurry, I imagine there were some corners cut and some mistakes that were made. So what are some of those lessons learned that organizations can maybe kind of keep in their back pocket for when they are planning for the next time this happens? And I think more and more people are believing that, yes, there will be a next time.
Yeah, I'll tell you one way that we solved the problem is we actually had a disaster recovery exercise 2 weeks before all this started to happen.
Wow.
And the result of that exercise was that we can't send our analysts home with the systems that they work on in the SOC. What we need to do is we need to build them managed Windows laptops so that we had some policy enforcement of that. And then when they access customer data, they go out to AWS and they use a virtual Linux system to access customer data. And we have all those controls baked in. And so having some control over those endpoints, super important, right? If everybody is just out there going willy-nilly, use your home computer, your kids have been on it, it is in an unknown state the day you got there, you may have been surveilled, there could be a keylogger on there the whole time, getting your passwords. So the issue of managed endpoints is real important. Apart from that, how you do the network, how you create remote access. To your point, a lot of organizations had to do whatever they could to get this going quickly. And part of that was, well, let's just open up RDP. You can use a remote desktop protocol directly to your work computer from your home computer. And so what happened was they just opened up the pipe and said, come on in, RDP. Well, RDP is known to be vulnerable to, a number of things and frankly, brute forcing. And right now, credentials are under attack more than anything else. If I get your password, I march into your network. I don't need some, exotic exploit to get you to bite on. I just kind of walk in. So credentials are under attack right now, and protecting your user credentials with the methodologies that you use, i.e., RDP should probably be deprecated because it's brute forcible. All those things I think are now going through as kind of after action, exercises, and the lessons learned from this I think are going to be sticky, because I think maybe 50% we're going to come back all the way and work in buildings again, but that's not clear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think we may see even more people at least working from home more often, if not all the time. So definitely, there will be more security considerations that I can see coming down the pike. So because of the fact that phase one was implemented in like a bang rather than a whimper, what are some of the things that have kind of cropped up besides the RDP that we're going to have to kind of clean, or companies are going to have to clean up post phase one moving forward? Are there certain attacks, certain security risks that we really need to be mindful of that have emerged as a result of the actions that were taken during phase one?
Well, there's one that I would be especially concerned about, and that's the uptick in surveillance, espionage, let's call it, activities by nation states. And a lot of that is it's focused on a theft of intellectual property. Mm-hmm. Right? So like right now, cures for COVID, if you're working on a cure for COVID, you're getting pounded.
Right.
So the potential for especially key personnel in organizations to have been compromised while at home and not under all of the controls that come in when you're working in the building and there's the network and the firewalls and all that stuff, and waiting for the reintroduction of that asset into the network so that it can then have access to the network from a privileged device, right? So I would be a little worried about that. And that's why we started this whole high-risk intake process, thinking about this. People's habits at home when you're not, on a network that's being monitored and all those things are not the same as the habits that you take to work. And that's just a truism. Again, your kid may end up playing games on your computer or who knows what. Your home Wi-Fi password may actually be really bad, and all those things may be true. And so treating the especially key personnel computers coming back into an organization with a good degree of suspicion, I think is something to watch for.
All right, great. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking a couple minutes and having the conversation with me. Really, really good, useful information. I hope organizations can kind of keep it in mind as they do implement their phase two security protocols and processes moving forward. So thanks for sharing. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, everybody, stay tuned. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so please stick around.
Thanks, Charlene. Those are two great interviews. Appreciate it. I think, it's that time of the show now where we head over to the Analyst Corner with Mitch. Mitchell Ashley, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group, has some a great interview for us today with Elise Carmichael. Mitchell, over to you.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, today I'm joined by Elise Carmichael. She's VP of Product Management at Functionize. And we're going to be talking about kind of the state of testing and how AI might be applied to that. So great to have you. I appreciate getting an opportunity to talk with you, Elise.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Well, let's start out by, if you would introduce yourself, tell us a bit about you. And then I know you just came to Functionize, so tell us a little bit about the company.
Yeah, you bet. So a little bit about myself. Like I said, my name is Elise Carmichael, and I joined Functionize about 2.5 months ago as the VP of Product. So my background is really in testing and engineering. So prior to Functionize, I worked at a company called Tricentis, which is, you may know, in the same kind of space as Functionize in the testing world. And Tricentis, a couple years ago now, I guess, merged with a company called QA Symphony, and QA Symphony created a product called QTest. So I ran product for QTest for a time, and then we merged and I ran product strategy for all of Tricentis for a bit before joining. And prior to that, I ran an engineering organization at a professional services company. I ran their testing team and have been a developer or a technical lead of teams for gosh, about 20 years now. But I really like this testing space because it's something that is, you know, it has not been given the same amount of love as other things. And so one of the things that really drew me to Functionize was they're really trying to make testing more modern. You know, I see a lot of legacy companies, and those legacy companies and products are still being used, like the Micro Focus suite, which was HP, which was Mercury. And it was a great product to start. It was really innovative, and it's just kind of over the years hasn't kept up with everything else going on. So one of the things that Functionize did was they really incorporated a lot of machine learning. They really kind of limit the scope in what they're trying to do. They're not trying to test absolutely everything in the world. You know, it's focused primarily on web testing. And as we see a lot of tools going to web or cloud interfaces, that really seems like the way, you know, if we can just focus there, let's do that right now. You know, I see SAP moving to SAP for S4HANA and you know, Salesforce Lightning, and all those digital transformations are all web-based. We're not seeing, you know, big on-premise systems. So that was another big draw, is, you know, being able to focus on the right stuff with a modern, you know, tool stack.
I think it's great to talk with you, especially since you've spent, you know, your career really around testing. And, you know, I've found, because I've been part of product development organizations too, and testing is one of those, you either have a passion for it or you don't, or you kind of have a knack for it or you don't. Some people are really good at just breaking things, and that's who you want. You know, you want that kind of mind
Absolutely.
crunching on software, crunching on designs and such. I'm curious, you mentioned, I'm going to kind of go a little different path here. You mentioned digital transformation. I wonder what do you see as some of the challenges that companies face as they go from maybe traditional software development, they're moving into DevOps, and now suddenly, hey, we want to, you know, not only digitize our applications into digital experiences for customers, but we're looking for strategic advantages for it, things we can do that are disruptive, et cetera. How does a test organization hear that, and what's your experience been with that?
Well, I'd say you're lucky to have testing as a thought during that transformation in the first place. They say, oh, we have to go cloud, we have to totally change our product, let's rewrite this. And they don't think about testing. So you asked, maybe, you know, there's a lot of different ways you could go with this, but, you know, maybe I'm redoing my website. Maybe I have some really old system and I want to like rewrite it into a new system. And maybe all of my old tests are manual tests. Maybe at the same time I'm redoing the system, maybe I can actually think about testing from the start and actually automate everything as I go. And one of the problems with all of this nowadays is automating it as you go does not always happen. As much as we want to say shift left is a thing and we introduce these things like BDD, actually having that be successful is so difficult, because what I think a lot of organizations don't realize is, okay, we're going to shift left, we're going to do this BDD thing, it's going to be great. They don't realize that BDD is still an old, you know, unit test framework using Selenium, and a developer or a test engineer still has to write it. It's just like a syntax sitting on top of it. So now, not only are you kind of doing the same kind of thing you would if you had to hire a bunch of developers to write tests, you're like adding a layer of complexity, which is all process related. So you have to introduce a new process, plus, all this other stuff that a lot of companies have already failed with many times. Not every company, but I'll say
Not every manual
majority.
process is great to automate, at least the way it's designed as a manual
Absolutely.
process, right? And certainly testing is very manual. Do you and historically, do you think it's just that organizations underappreciate how much work it is to do all that automation to get, a complete suite of automated testing going? I mean, it used to be that it was just, hey, we just got the software done. We barely have time to test it. Don't stand in the way of releasing it, right? Okay, so usually testing and documentation were the folks that got very little time. Now I think it's just not even appreciating what it really takes. Do you agree with that?
I think a lot of it's not appreciated. So there's kind of two things I see. One, it's not appreciated. Maybe it's the first time these people have really gone through this transition and they think, oh, I'll just hire a tester, no big deal. The other is the group that got burned trying to automate at some point, and they've made some investment here and there. And I see that a lot, actually. So they, they'll say, okay, well, you 5 people, you 3 people, you're interested in writing code and you want to be test engineers, go learn, go do whatever you did, and you get this kind of like bottom up approach where some people kind of try something out. And there's a lot of problems with that we see all the time. On occasion it's successful, absolutely, but you have to get this like whole corporate buy-in to say, this is how we're going to do it. And that doesn't get a lot of support in general. And so, you'll say, okay, we're going to do this automation framework. We're going to create it from scratch. It's probably going to be JUnit. Or some test framework. It's probably going to be Selenium. And then like one person kind of develops this framework, and they're kind of the core developer on the group. They get it inside and out. They set it up, and then everyone else on the team gets it, but maybe not to the same level. It's typical in engineering in general. And then writing Selenium tests gets so very copy paste, and you say, okay, well, this is how I'm going to select this button on the screen. This is how I'm going to click it, and it's there. So now you have to maintain this world of tests every single time anything changes. So that's a big problem. And just so you have creation of the test. Not everyone knows the skill set. You have maintenance of the test, where any little tiny change, you might have to update the scripts, and you won't know until they're all done. And then you have to kind of debug just like a developer would. So it's like a whole skill set. And then there's this whole matter of like scaling the test. So where are you going to run these tests? Do I want to test it in 8 different browsers? Am I testing mobile web? Am I testing a tablet size? Am I testing, so do I need to get a DevOps engineer involved? How many machines? How many can I run in parallel? So those are the 3 like really big problems that we see. And so it's so common to fail in one of those areas. Maintenance is what we hear as kind of the biggest problems. That was the first thing that Functionize wanted to solve, was like, we will help you maintain your test. We will use legitimate machine learning. And actually we use quite a few different algorithms combined to help you maintain the test. You can actually sort of redesign your site, and you don't have to touch your tests. It'll just say, hey, you changed this little thing, just say, no, test still run, still fine. And if we're not sure of something being the same, we might give you a warning and say, hey, it's not right. Or if we said, can't find it anymore, but there's a 20% chance it might be this, or a 10% chance it might be this, you can just click it and fix it. So that's the kind of thing that we're going for the maintenance. And obviously one of the other big things that we do is the scalability. So out of the box, you can just go ahead and run all the tests in parallel, as long as your tests and your environment allows that. You can run them all kind of flat in the cloud.
Well, let's back up a little bit back to and I appreciate you describing the 3 problems, and I'll bet any one of us that's been around test or in test could go have a beer and talk for 6 hours about all the challenges. It's a tough job, a tough thing to do. You talk about applying AI to it. Usually AI and machine learning specifically is about, you have to have quite a large set of data to really get the value out of machine learning. Are you taking learnings from everybody that uses Functionize products? Is it primarily from a customer's environment, the test code that they've already written, maybe some application code? How do you drive that machine learning process?
Yeah, we actually pull tons and tons of data. So depending on which algorithm we're talking about, because we have some like visual based things, we have text based things. So every time you create a test, so this is with our new product that we actually just released called Functionize Architect. When you're creating the tests using this tool, every time you click on something, every time you scroll the page, every time you do anything, we actually pull the entire page code, the entire DOM, at that moment in time, and we have all of that data from every single test. So that by itself is a lot of data, and it adds up very, very quickly. Every time you run the tests, we pull that same data. And then we also have a couple other sources. I know we've pulled data from some kind of in the education space for pulling page data. We have various libraries for things. So if you wanted to like change a word in your application from, I'm trying to think of a good synonym, like cup to glass, maybe that would be a synonym. We have libraries of data like that, so we can kind of guess, hey, this is a
Look
synonym.
for similarities and
Yeah. So there's a lot of different sources depending on the type of thing that we're looking at. So we look at, positional data. Is this thing siblings to other things? If you want to verify a piece of data in like a table, you don't have to like loop through the table until you find the row that you're looking for, because we know that that piece of data that you're verifying is attached to all the other information in the row. So we want to kind of change the way you think about testing so it should be quicker and easier. But that's also kind of a training thing. You have to sort of learn how to do that.
Man, long ways away from the XY screen scraping days.
Absolutely,
sure.
Absolutely.
Test folks in some ways are and have some similarities to security people. They're kind of skeptical. Got to prove it to me. Show me how this works.
Totally.
And that's a compliment, by the way.
Yeah.
But what's the biggest question when somebody, you show up, they download whatever, they say, hey, we're going to test your stuff, look at it. What's the biggest thing you have to prove to someone to convert them to be a customer?
It's probably that maintenance piece. So when, we have this happen all the time where someone will make, have their website and they'll make some changes behind the scenes and say, you should have just known that element moved over here, and you should have just known it was still considered a pass, which in a lot of cases it works. But you can definitely, any kind of machine learning algorithm is prone to error. If you talk to Alexa or Siri or any of those, they, how frustrating they are because they don't just work all the time. So it's sort of, machine learning is kind of like, it's a set of algorithms to sort of interpret what they think you meant. So if you're trying to read a character set like letters or something, and I write my own letter C and it's handwritten, you're going to use machine learning to try and figure out, okay, well, that's kind of in between these two things that I know are the letter C. We're not 100% sure, could be wrong, could be like an S and I just didn't see the little thing. So everything's kind of not a guesstimate, but a really good guesstimate. So, we're always prone to errors. Yeah, and you could change your website enough where we would have no idea, like you renamed something completely, moved it to a different type of element away from everything else. And of course, we're going to say we can find the thing we're looking for. But in most cases, that's not how development is done. So that's kind of tricky when we get asked the impossible question sometimes.
Sure. I'll bet. You've mentioned maintenance a couple times, and I'm not sure that, the new shiny thing always gets the attention, right? The new product, the new software project, the new development, this new initiative, especially if it's tied to some kind of digital transformation or something with a lot of visibility. But at the same time, everything we do creates this more stuff on the mountain to backlog, right? Of things we have to maintain and test and do. Is there a way, how can you best show an appreciable difference between how things are being done before and once they start using FunctionEye? So there's some key metrics that are really valuable to look at?
Probably the main thing would be if you're automating beforehand. So a lot of people are still in kind of this manual space. So there's an obvious time savings there. But if you're say doing Selenium or some sort of version of that and you're struggling and you want to see, okay, well, is this going to help me or not? You can basically import your tests in a couple of different ways. And if you can change the code and your tests don't fail so frequently, that would be the obvious metric, is how many times are your tests failing when they shouldn't have failed? How much time are you spending debugging your tests versus the code? So that's kind of the obvious metric is, and also that's on the maintenance side. The creation side, it should be much, much, much quicker to create a test using our software than to script one. So those aren't even, they're not even comparable. I could go create a very complex test that, verifies text messages and email messages and parses data in them and hits an API to go reset some flow or hits the database to make sure something is right. And that'll take me 2 minutes to write. If I had to script that, it would take a very long time, even if I had a framework in place, because it's kind of a complex setup.
Doesn't require those development or scripting skills.
Exactly. And I say this as a developer, and I love writing code, and I still do for fun. But I would still prefer to have a tool that kind of accelerates things and, but something extensible where I can write code if it doesn't do what I want it to do. So that's another place we try to kind of fit in.
Interesting. Let's talk about the DevOps process. And I know that you integrate with a number of tools, things that people are going to be familiar with, like, the Jira and Bamboo and Jenkins, the whole CI/CD process. Is there a secret to being really effective to integrating in that kind of a process into a CI/CD pipeline? What's really important to think about?
So yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you are wanting to do something on code commit, right? Like say I want to run my whole regression suite on code commit, that might not be the best even with a product like ours, because as say you have 1,000 tests in your regression suite or 2,000 tests in your regression suite, those flows are still going to take some minutes to run depending on how complex they are or longer. You don't want to hold up your builds for that. So you still want to have, we call them orchestrations, you still want to have like a smoke suite orchestration. So you still want to think about what tests are running when, what are the high value tests versus what are your edge case tests. But the tests are so quick to write, so we still let you organize and do test management. So you can say, okay, well, this is my regression suite for this area. This is a smoke test suite that on every single code commit, easy to run. And, maybe you'll slow the build down by a minute or 2 minutes tops. What you just have to balance that.
Plus you're balancing multiple environments, test production, maybe production across different clouds or as well as front end devices. Now you mentioned web. Is that also mobile web or primarily laptop?
Absolutely mobile web. So we support, Safari and iOS and Chrome and Android and whatnot, and different tablet sizes. You can change the screen size. But also we also will run the tests on an emulator for iOS or for Android. Yeah, one of the other things you can do with our product is you can do a data-driven test. So you can, in some scenarios, just pull in all the different scenarios you'd like to run on a more regression type suite. So you don't have to run all of those on your code commit either.
Excellent. So you just released Architect, but it sounds like that'd been in beta for a while. So you've had some pretty good hands-on using it, really making sure it's bulletproof, but pretty close to be able to launch it.
Absolutely. Yeah, we like to give our customers, when we can, kind of sneak peeks to what's coming up so we can get feedback. I see a lot of companies that don't really do that. And I want to hear directly from our customers what you like, what you don't like. Would you change the user experience? How are you using this product so that we can make it better for them? So we had it out in beta for about the last month. And we actually have a webinar about it tomorrow on some of the more advanced features that we're putting out. So, it's not like it's done. We still have more features. We're just about to release, looping and conditionals. If you, are scrolling through like a carousel on a screen and you want to find the right picture and make sure the picture shows up correctly. So things like that we're still putting out, and we'll continue to.
Very good. Very good. Now your website's functionize.com, right? That's where you, is it downloadable, I assume? Is that how people can consume this, or how does that work?
The application, the Functionize platform is a multi-tenant SaaS solution, although we do have other deployment options. That's the most popular one. Architect is actually a Chrome extension. Okay. So you can sign up for a trial on our website and you could get the Chrome extension and try it out.
That's where I got off track. I knew there was some software involved in there, and it's just a credit card to sign up online, and now you're using the platform, kind of thing.
Well, we ask that you reach out for a trial so we can show it to you or give it to you as needed. But it's pretty easy to set up and go through on your own.
Well, wonderful. Well, I wish you the best in your new role, relatively new role, but not a new role in terms of your industry experience, certainly. Sure. And it'd be interesting to see as the AI side of this also grows. There's a lot of sort of labeled AI things that aren't AI, and some that really are, And so I would imagine that'd be a pretty tough thing to sell to a test group, that you're doing machine learning if you aren't. So
absolutely. We're definitely the real deal. We have a huge percentage of our developers are actually data scientists and PhDs in that space. So they know what they're doing much more than I would.
Well, good, good. Glad you got a great team working with you too. Well, thanks. This has been a really interesting conversation. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the state of testing too, as well as what Functionize is doing.
Great. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Thanks very much, Mitchell. Well, you know it's Thursday, and Thursday is time for our channel roundup with the king of channels, Mike Vizard. Mike has some good information for us today, as well as some timely advice. So let's hand things over to Mike Vizard on Channel Roundup.
Hey, thanks, Alan. So we're leading off with the Red Hat Summit, which is all about Ansible automation and OpenShift, which is their distribution of Kubernetes with a lot of application development tools wrapped around it. At the show, they were talking about the availability of new cloud services that augment Ansible. So those of you who do not know what Ansible is, it is a declarative platform for automating IT that's gaining a lot of traction. It's being adopted by not just Red Hat, but Cisco to manage everything from infrastructure as code in the cloud to network services deployed locally. Declarative is geek speak for something that means you do not have to be a programming rocket scientist to use this. The average human IT administrator can wrap their brains around it. They're also talking about how OpenShift 4.4 will come with a bunch of tools that will be add-ons, I expect. They're available in preview mode, that will enable you to manage OpenShift deployments at scale. It's a good chat with Brian Gracely, also on this network, talking about what are the challenges associated with deploying Kubernetes at scale. It's one thing to deploy one cluster. It's quite another to manage 10, 15, 20, and someday even hundreds of these things. And I think that's going to be a huge opportunity for partners to lend that expertise, plus maybe even deliver the managed services. Finally, Red Hat's talking about KubeVirt, which is about how do I take an existing virtual machine and drop it on a container. You may ask yourself, well, who would want to do that? But as it turns out, one of the advantages is that you can take all these legacy apps that run on VMs today, drop them into containers, and run everything on a single platform called Kubernetes, or in this case, OpenShift. And that creates an opportunity to consolidate your costs. And as we all know, that's a big issue these days for folks in terms of what they're thinking about IT and the rest of this year, given the COVID-19 pandemic. Finally, I'd also bring your attention to Kaloom, which partnered with Red Hat and is delivering a virtual switch that you can deploy at the edge in collaboration with OpenShift to build next generation microservices-based applications for things like 5G networks that will all need to be used to drive, say, real-time applications involving, for example, virtual reality applications deployed out at the edge. And those things are all going to need network services. So keep your eye on what's going on with Kaloom and Red Hat. Other news on the Kubernetes front is Couchbase this week made available an update to its operator software. Operators are tools that you use for deploying Kubernetes clusters and the software that runs on top of those clusters. It makes it a lot easier. You don't have to be necessarily a programming genius to figure it out. The important thing here, though, is Couchbase is also starting to wrap in a lot of automation capabilities into their instance of their operator, which means that a lot of things now that you used to have to do manually will soon be automated. It's not quite clear who's going to be running these Couchbase databases, which are really document databases. Might be developers, might be DevOps teams, it might be managed service providers, or it might be traditional DBAs. Point is, though, these things are coming to Kubernetes in droves. The reason is people want to build stateful applications, and this is one of the easiest ways to do it. Also, in the land of Kubernetes, Trilio is making available its data protection software for Kubernetes. Their argument is, hey, just use one platform to back up everything, and now Kubernetes is just one more platform in their pantheon of services. Now, the other thing to think about here as we move to continue the conversation about Kubernetes and containers is, hey, there are all these application images running around now that are built on containers. There's been an update to Turn, which is now called Turn 2.0, which is an open source container inspection tool specifically for container images. It was built originally by VMware and is now available as open source code. I think there's an opportunity for partners to build a practice around this. I don't think most organizations have any clue what's inside those container images these days, and anybody who does, you might suspect them of stretching the truth a bit. They might not even know what containers are running. So I think there's an opportunity for partners to start looking at Turn and say, hey, can we build a security practice for containers and Kubernetes out of this thing? Also, there's a startup this week you might want to pay some attention to. This is not directly related to Kubernetes, but it's interesting nonetheless. Accurix has created this cloud inspection model. It examines your cloud deployment based on code that you might have used, say, using Terraform. And it will look for that to see if there's vulnerabilities in there, to determine if there has been any kind of compliance issue that has arisen, and then send you an alert to that. And if you want, you can then roll everything back to the last known good state. They're describing this as the equivalent of the time machine feature in your favorite operating system that can now be applied to cloud configurations, which is awesome because as far as I know, most of the issues that have anything to do with security involving the cloud have to do with a misconfiguration. Finally, Tech Data this week had a little online event where they were basically touting what's going on with endpoints and reminding all the channel partners that now might be a good time to switch customers over to what they call their technology as a service program. The idea is that instead of buying endpoint gear, you essentially rent it, and over the life of a 2 or 3 year contract, you might get a 2 or 3 upgrades within that cycle, all managed by the channel partner. This comes on the heels of their recent launch of an online coaching service. The idea is that you can sign up here and Tech Data will make available experts that you can collaborate with and maybe even come up with a couple ideas from new projects. Now, I don't think there's a confessional involved, so you don't have to stand there and say, forgive me, Tech Data, it's been 30 days since my last big deal. But as far as I can tell in these times, any help you can get is welcome. And with that, back to Alan.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey, thanks very much, Mike. Always a pleasure having Mike give us the channel roundup and his insights. Guys, that's going to wrap it up for Thursday, April 30th. It's the last day of April. I know for many of you, May 1st represents a chance maybe to get out a little bit. If you can, do it safely as possible, obviously. And we'll see you back here tomorrow on Friday, May 1st. But until then, this is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. Stay strong, stay well, stay healthy, stay strong. TechStrong.